My name is Elaine, and I was just telling the people here that I was actually born in Bristol, in Lochleys. And I'm here to talk to you about my experiences, which has been ongoing all through my life, and still really highly involved with it now, with extraterrestrials. And I didn't know that that's what they were until probably I started full contact, aware full contact, probably when I was in my late 30s, early 40s. But I did start to get recall about what had been happening later on in life, and it actually started, those are the advertising. That's the cover of my 2 books. There's a third one imminently due out now, and they're there, and there's on offer tonight, 2 for 20. This one has pictures in of the ETs I've seen, because I also paint them, and I do the covers and stuff. So let's get past that. It all began actually when I was about 3. That's me and my dad. And if we kind of come to, I don't know, I had a major experience when I was about 15, 16, which I'll come to in a minute. But the things that I used to experience and the things that I thought were normal, I didn't realize that nobody else could see the things that I saw and all that sort of stuff. But one of the most remarkable things that happened to me when I was 3 was, and I remember it, having studied clinical hypnotherapy. I'm a therapist, by the way, as well. And I work with sound, very cutting edge specialist sound, computer-based. And one of the things that I included in my repertoire was clinical hypnotherapy. And I learned then that if you want to imprint something onto anyone, there are 2 or 3 prerequisites. So it's like if you want to imprint a child with something positive or something negative, this is how things happen. A loud noise and a shout, and sometimes if you smack a child and say, "You're naughty, you know, you're doing this," it sticks. And the reason that this occurrence stuck in my mind, because I was actually hanging out or had the window open on the 2nd floor out of the bedroom. I was only about 3. I'd opened the window and I was watching the moon outside. And I can remember it vividly because I was singing. I was, just a childish thing I was singing. And my father must have heard me, and I heard him bang, 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 come up the stairs. And of course he thought, oh my God, she's going to fall out the window. So he grabbed me, smacked me on the leg, and said, get into bed, get into bed. He said, if you get out of bed, if you do that again, I'll put a blanket over the window and nail it. So I remembered that event, consciously remembered it all my life. But what I hadn't remembered was the bit that came in between when I'd actually opened the window and been looking out. And that was an encounter with an Andromedan. And when I started to get full recall of it, I remember seeing the moon was up there, a very big full moon, which was what I was looking at. But there was also this ship that came across, and these 2 pictures of the same woman, she appeared to me like that. And I think she appeared like that so as not to frighten me, to be a bit more human looking. And she spoke to me telepathically. She did something to me, put some energy into me, which I've talked about in my book. And then my father came up and she left, and that was fine. And I didn't re-encounter her to speak to till it was back around about 1994. But they were part of my life. I did have experiences of out-of-body experiences. I also had missing time. I remember one time when I used to go and I used to learn the piano, got sent to piano lessons. And I used to catch the bus from Lockleys when I was about 7 down to the end of Muller Road. Before all the motorway was there, it was just the park and there was a bus. And I used to go after school, so it was about a 10-minute bus ride, and I should have been there for about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And I can remember this particular time when I was upstairs, and it's very, very vivid because at that point in time, there used to be ashtrays in the backs of the seats. So when you sat upstairs, I used to have my nose always pressed to the window looking in the gardens and things. You could smell the cigarette, and I remember there was a cigarette butt there with lipstick on it. And this man came in. It was a very hot afternoon. This man came up the stairs in the bus, and he had on a big, heavy coat. And it smelled wet, you know, like he'd been in a rainstorm. And he was sat there with his collar turned up, and I was looking at the smelling the ashtray and looking out the window and all that sort of stuff. And suddenly he turned round in the seat in front of me, and he touched me there. And frightened me, so I got up and I ran downstairs to get off the bus. And when I got off the bus, it was my stop, but it was dark and it was pouring with rain, because the imagery of, you know, the old-fashioned buses, you got off the bus, I could see big pools of water in the tarmac and all the lights glittering on the tarmac. And then I got told off, where have you been? You know, you're an hour or so late, and so on and so forth. But being a kid, I just sat there and did as I was told. I had to wait for the other child to finish their lesson. My mother wanted to know what was going on, and it was before it was before we had kind of don't even remember if we had a telephone or not, but anyway. So lots of things happened to me, and then when I was 15, and this is an absolutely real, conscious, not I dreamt it or anything like that. This was really a conscious thing. I was coming home from school one afternoon. I'd been this is by the time we'd moved to Stapleton. So my mother and dad had a little lock-up shop there. And I used to go into the shop and have a cup of tea with my mum before I went home. So I'd been in there for about an hour. She said, go on home and do your homework. I'll be down at tea time to get your tea and stuff. And I remember walking across the road. It was hot. There was sparrows in the dust and all that. Very vivid. And we lived in a prefab. So between where the little shop was and our prefab down at the bottom, there was 3 lampposts. One near the shop, one in the middle, and one outside on the corner by our house. And as I walked past the first lamppost, I suddenly saw or felt that there was somebody walking beside me. And I physically felt like I lifted off the ground, and I glided down. I just was gliding. I don't remember walking, but I was just going down the road, and this person was with me. Now, you can see who it is, can't you? And I think that I saw him like that simply because I'd been to Sunday school. By the time I was 15 or 16, I couldn't give a monkeys about God and all that sort of stuff. It was all rubbish, atheist. But as a child, all kids get sent to Sunday school, so I'd had little pictures of what Jesus is supposed to look like, and I thought, if they think God's an old man on a throne, I can't be bothered with any of that. But this person appeared beside me. I could see every detail of his toes. He had on a white robe like that. He had beautiful chestnut hair, but he had really amazing blue eyes. And when we got, it's like we kind of floated down the road together, And we got to just before the last lamppost, and he turned and I turned, and he looked at me, and in my head, I heard the words, "I am always with you." Or actually he said, "I am with you always." And then, and in that moment, I felt this rush of ecstasy, if you want. It felt like I was bigger than the universe and bigger than anything. And it was a real, tangible, physical feeling. And then he was gone. And then, being 15 years old and with a big, heavy satchel, I thought, oh. And I went indoors and made another cup of tea and forgot all about it. Well, I didn't forget, because I can remember I had an argument when I was about to get married, when I was about 22. And we had to do the band thing and the vicar and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that we had to do was we had to talk about miracles. And I'd said to him, well, I think I had a miracle in my life. I said, I remember when I was 15, this happened to me, and I think I saw Jesus, I said, that's what he looked like. I said, and I felt it, and it was amazing, and all that sort of stuff. And this kind of put the tin hat on it for me, because he said, well, he said, I don't know, he said, I don't think you did. He said, I'm a vicar, he said, and I've been in the church how many years? He said, and I've never seen Jesus, so how could you possibly see Jesus? And I thought, oh, well, Anyway, so, but throughout especially my older life, I felt very strongly the presence of guides and angelic beings. Angelic beings have been a lot stronger in my later life, but that was a very nice angelic being that came to me with that ball of energy in his hand. And he said, and this is a good message for everybody actually, he said, I represent destiny. He said, but this in my hand, he said, is potential. He said, everyone has this. You all have the potential to be anything you want. You just have to take it and use it, which I thought was beautiful. So I used to do guide pictures and things like that. So angels and guides I've seen come in all shapes and sizes. When I was about 17 was when my real psychic ability leapt out and started to manifest itself through a series of events, which I won't go into now. But it was then that I suddenly realized that not only could I see people and hear them, but I also had healing energy in my hands, and that and my biggest asset, if you will, was that I wasn't afraid. This is what kills people stone dead when they're trying to open up to spirit, and that they have so many fears about, I can't do it, or this and that. I had no expectations, it just happened. And I found it was easy, and I found that I felt strong when I was doing it. So when other people were having difficulties, I kind of knew what to do. I knew what to say. So I experienced, in those years before I got married, I experienced all kinds of things, including full clairaudience. That happened twice. Once was when I was in hospital, and well, I'll tell you the story, it's very quick. I was in hospital for something, I don't even remember what, and a woman in the bed next to me was brought in, and she was a bit hard to handle. She was all over the show, and she didn't really want to be there, and she was making a lot of noise and all that sort of stuff. So they got her to bed and they put her to sleep and all the rest of it. But in the middle of the night, I got woken up with my bed went bang like that, and the whole bed shook. And I sat up and I thought, oh God, the woman's got out of bed and fallen on my bed. When I looked around, she was fast asleep, and then a voice in my head said, tell her I love her, and tell her I was thinking of her when I died. And I thought, who the heck is, who's that? Because it was not in my head, it was in the room. It was a voice in the room. And it was only later the next day when there was a big hoo-ha going on across the ward, and the woman in the opposite bed, one of the nurses had come in and said, "Oh, do you know Mr. So-and-so? Apparently he passed away last night." Well, they didn't realize that this Mr. So-and-so was her new partner. She was in her 60s. Her husband had died. She was a widow, so she'd finally found someone that she could love. And then somebody comes in and, without knowing that it's her partner, tells her, that he's dead, and that, that was a big upset. So, so many things. That's one of the ETs I've seen in recent years, another angelic being. And I've also been privileged to see this kind of being, which is more like a kind of a Devic, wood sprite kind of person. They're quite spectacular when you see them. Unfortunately, I'm able to get them to stay still long enough so that I can really see what it is they look like. I went through my life having this gift, and I saw my first UFO when I was probably about 23. And that was, I used to drive a laundry van for Brooks Laundry. And I was on my rounds. I delivered dry cleaning. I was on my rounds coming through Down End, and that was before all the motorway was, all the ring road was built. And just before we got onto the main road there, suddenly there it was, up in the sky, big, shiny, not all that far up UFO. So I parked the van on a bus stop, got out and stood on the running board and was looking, and I was even pointing, and I was thinking, is anybody going to stop and come and have a look at this thing? And it was fabulous. It was kind of oval with glinty kind of windows or whatever it was, and it was slowly kind of about helicopter height, slowly moving across a clear blue sky, not a cloud in sight. Great day. And then suddenly, as I was watching, it went, gone. It just kind of blinked out. And I assumed it had kind of gone that way, but it could have gone up or down or anywhere. And at that point in time, I phoned the local newspaper. I phoned Filton Aerodrome. I said, did anybody, it was airplane. I did all the checking. And the only lead that I had was that the guy from the Evening Post said, oh, there was a lot of UFO sightings in France last week. So I thought, so again, it's like life. These things happen to me, and then life goes on, you get married, you have kids. And it was, again, when just before about 89, when I was running a business at that point, and I'd promised my guides that I would talk to them. And when I actually sat down to do it, this person came in that said they were from the Galactic Federation. I thought, yeah, this one's got bells on, and my guides are testing me, and So anyway, I sat and I listened and I recorded it, and checked it out the following day, and it turned out that there was apparently such a thing as the Galactic Federation. And all the things that they had informed me of were things that unfolded one after the other. And there was a reason behind that, because when I moved from one place to another, that was when I met this being who said he was from Sirius, or the Sirius cluster of stars. And he started to give me amazing information. When I finally knuckled down and said, okay, I'll sit and I'll listen to you, he started to give me the most amazing information. Good information that is useful, because I'm an incredibly practical person, very grounded. I know that this may seem like as far out as you can get, and I mean, there's a lot more than I'm telling you now. But I am very grounded, and I'm very practical, and I don't just, If somebody starts to give me like love and light and lovely messages, I need to know what for. You know, what shall I do with this? I'm not going to just listen and then not do anything with it. If it's a valid message, if it's something that's going to help everybody else, then I'll stick my neck out and write the book and put it out there. But it's like they're not here to waste anybody's time or give you a lot of platitudes. They're really, really here to teach us something important about how we should be changing our world and how we should be living and all that sort of stuff. But they're not going to force, nobody's going to force anybody. They're just going to offer it and say, have you thought that this might be a better way? Look how these people do it. Now, this being here, when I first saw him, he is actually about 15 foot tall. 15 foot, so what are we looking at here? 8 foot, 9 foot? Very big, very big. And he took me to a planet, if you want to call it that, and I was talking to this gentleman here and explaining how I have the ability to get my mind in the right place where I completely go out. I'm still attached, but if he takes me somewhere, I'm there 100%. I can smell and touch and taste and see and read whatever they show me. So he took me to this place and he presented me with a big podium with a book on it. Well, I was looking at, and he said, use your mind. He said, you can be any size you want to be. So, of course, I then became the right size, like Alice in Wonderland. And if it, you know, it's too funny and stupid not to be true, really. And he then started to give me lots and lots of, not like stories, like metaphors of teaching. And a lot of the time I wouldn't know what he was on about until we actually came to the twist at the end. And then I thought, oh yeah, of course, that's what he means. And I like it like that, because then I know that I'm not, I'm just following and writing down things that seem to be random. And I found that's always a good thing to do when learning how to receive things clearly that are the truth. It's like I never put any judgment on anything, so that if I see something that is surprising, I don't think to myself, oh no, you know, that couldn't be that. That's probably wrong. I don't do that anymore. Well, I've never done it right from the beginning, because you're blocking the flow and your own left brain is getting in the way. So I liked what he was telling me. And then he then said, we are going to introduce you to some of the different races that do not look human or aren't particularly humanoid like you. And they wanted me to be able to show people, because back then there was always this fear of like little green men with, you know, laser, like aliens being weird and funny, and you know, octopuses and all that sort of stuff. And he wanted to show me that there are as many diverse types of people out there as there are insects on the land, fish in the sea, thousands and thousands of different genetic combinations. A lot of them out there on the inhabited planets are very humanoid, because they said the standard kind of blueprint for this galaxy is 2 arms, 2 legs, and, you know, a head shaped like ours. But there are lots of genetic variations. And I also, just as a matter of interest, during the exchanges I had with him, I met other ETs, and I was talking to this gentleman here about that, who made it very clear to me that lots and lots of extraterrestrial souls incarnate here. They incarnate here for experience, and they incarnate here to do jobs. And they're right now, in this era, this time period we are in now of great, huge change, there are millions of us here. Millions of you, here, helping the Earth to transition through the changes that we're going through. But there were some that kind of sent down kind of people to see if an incarnation here would be suitable for them at that point in time, some of the elders. And there were also those ETs that just wanted to help with telepathic information and guidance. This particular one gave me lots of information on herbs and plants and things that could really help, things that were as yet undiscovered that have come to light since. From the medicine side, because I'm very deeply into the work I do involves medical diagnosis and treating people for all kinds of illnesses across the board. So I take my work very seriously, and I have to be able to talk to doctors and know about all kinds of medical conditions. So I found that very interesting. So this was a little being they're actually quite small, and when he kind of interfaced with me telepathically, the one thing I found very interesting about him was his personality, and he kind of thought like he looked. He was very, very quick and bright, like almost like a mouse or a cat. And he was a botanist. And, as far as I know, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, there are many, many different ET groups that come here collecting animal samples, saving some of our endangered species by taking them off the planet and putting them somewhere else where they can thrive, taking plant samples, all the things that we're, killing with our, the way we behave on this planet, and trees and whatnot. And he was quite interested to tell me about what he was doing, and he showed me around his ship and what he was doing and all that. But apart from that, he didn't give me much else. And you see, I've written on there, he's from Arcturus. Now, the Arcturian group of planets and the sun and all the rest of it that there are a lot of very, very different people, shapes and sizes. And I don't know how many of you are aware of like all the different densities that are available.
Do you mean by like dimensions?
Densities and dimensions, yes. Frequency and the dimensions. So it's like as I stand here, it's like I'm probably standing in a whole layer cake of a million different dimensions, but they all have a different frequency. So I can only perceive what I resonate with. So it's like the tuning fork principle and the breaking the glass with the wine in by singing a note. Only when you match the resonance can you achieve an effect, or can you relate to that particular dimension. So this being was really interesting. Now, when I first saw this being, I was a bit alarmed, because I thought it looked a bit like a dinosaur, and I thought, or a reptile or something like that. And I thought, is this safe? Am I all right with this? And they brought this being specifically to illustrate a point, because there is a lot of bad press, and some of it rightly so, about reptilians and that, but there are very strong divisions between the entire species of reptoid beings, reptilian beings, and it's like saying because ISIS is bad, the whole of Earth is bad. You can't talk like that. So they were teaching me to be non-judgmental and non-discriminatory until I'd found out what he actually was like. So when I when I was introduced to this being, I said, well, what is he? Where does he live? And that. And he's semi-aquatic, so he lives on this, in this place where there's water, so he can go under the water if he wants, a bit like a crocodile can go under the water, come out of the water. But then I've been privy to such extraordinary experiences. They allowed me into his mind. And when our minds came together, if you could imagine deep, like the Mariana Trench, at the deepest part of the ocean, still, and imagine the sonar going bing, and it just going out into deep, deep, quiet, beautiful, spacious, peace. That was what his mind was like. It was huge. I mean, it was just huge energy of vastness. It was amazing. And they told me that these beings have powers with their minds that, we would be speechless at. That they can manipulate matter and do anything they want, but they choose not to. They choose to be very simple. And the Syrian did say to me, if they ever chose to go out into the galaxy, like travelers with spaceships, he said they would be an awesome race to encounter, and that they're like the Zen masters of their kind, as it were. So then they introduced me to this being who had a kind of a pointy head, but when he arrived, he actually had on like a visor over his eyes, like a wrap-around sunglasses type thing. And I said to my guide, I said to the Syrian guide, I said, I don't want to interact with him until I can see his eyes. I don't want him hiding behind this visor. So, and this is when he took off the visor, and it was like blue beams coming out of his eyes. Unbelievable. It's like light. I mean, I've painted it like I saw it because it was. That's why he wears these glasses. Sounds like X-Men, but truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. So then I asked him the obvious question, because his skin was tinged blue, and I said, how can you do this with your eyes, and what is it, And he said, it's ever so simple. He said, we come from a planet where the predominant mineral is blue gypsum. It's in the water, it's in the food, it's in everything, and it gets into the pigments of our eyes, like flamingos with the krill. And he said, hence we have this amazing thing going on with our eyes. So I said, well, that's fair enough. And he said, and I put glasses because it's kind of disarming. And it's good for me when I come out of, when I'm coming somewhere like this, to keep them covered. And a lot of the ET races use tonal language. They don't, it's like music, but not music. It's a tonal language. And his, totally unpronounceable. A lot of them have got unpronounceable names, and a lot of them don't have a name per se. I use our words to describe what they may have, like a husband or a wife, but it's not. They don't have that. They have partners and other things. And so what their names actually, it's more of a feeling than anything else. And one of the most beautiful things that I was allowed to experience was the Andromedan female brought her family. I call it family, but it was 2 offspring that she had. One was a girl, one was a boy. And when I asked the girl what her name was, she said, well, you can call me really anything you want, but what my name is this. And she gave me an experience that was incredibly beautiful. Now, if I said to you, just imagine that you're in a garden on a summer's day, it's rained, it smells fabulous, the grass has just been cut, and there's a rose, a beautiful old-fashioned French rose that smells wonderful, just coming out like that. I said, and you bend over and you touch the rose with your nose. It's very soft. Any of you ever done that? Touch it with your nose. Smell it, that lovely, deep perfume. That is what her name is. That whole experience is her name. And I you know, a lot of the time I spend with these people with my mouth open thinking, blimey, that surprised me. So then, this is a being who was very, very particular to say, to make sure I realized that he was a reptoid and not a reptilian, because they do sometimes make a big effort not to be classified with the reptilians. And he was a very curious and friendly explorer. You know, people who go out like, what's his name, climbs Mount Everest and goes across the sea. They were just out exploring. They're not really interested in what's going on Earth. They're just exploring. Because I asked him, you know, I said, have you got any involvement with what's happening now? Excuse me. And he said, no. So I did ask him a few questions. I said, well, what's it like on your planet? You know, where you come from, or your group of planets. And he very kindly gave me this image of these loads and loads of tall towers. Now these trees are, you know, the kind of leaves like rubber plants. They've all got very strong, non-porous leaves on them. And these tall towers, there's glass or something that you would look like glass, but apparently their planet passes between two suns. So at certain times of the year, they get they get a lot of solar wind coming from all directions, and so these things all close up. Everything locks down. And I said to him, well, how did the trees survive? And then he showed me all this kind of underground watering system that was going on there. But a very interesting thing he did tell me was about his lineage, because I said, well, I'm always interested in like ordinary things, like how many kids do you have, where do you live? Which wouldn't you be? You know, I would be. I'd say, well, what do you eat? What do you have for dinner? Do you go to the toilet? Because I want to know. And I thought it was a pretty obvious thing. So I said to him, you know, about his families and things like that. And he said, well, the females of our races do have multiple births. He said, but it's a majority of, I think he said it was more females than males. So you might get 6 female babies and 1 male in a clutch, if you want, like kittens or something like that. And he said the males are pretty important. He said because he said we have a very revered place that we go where we can speak with our ancestral line. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So anyway, he took me to this place, and it was like a vast room with a semicircular kind of screen thing in there. And he said, this is the place where we see our ancestors. And he said, every male in the line, when we leave our body, we go and we amalgamate with the one. So if you had like the beginning reptile, and then he became a father and a grandfather, and he died, and then the father, all the souls along that line, in that lineage, all amalgamate together to one big soul with a lot of knowledge from way back. And I thought, well, that sounds sensible. And he said, in times of trouble, he said, we can call upon them to come forward and speak with us if we need them. So I thought, well, that's very original and very new. I would not have thought that was possible, but there you go. And then I met these amazing beings with the tall heads. And they are masters of apparently genetic code manipulation with frequency, which is an area I'm extremely interested in because I do know an incredible amount about frequency and the human body and what it does and what it can do. But they're very benevolent beings. And I also went on to meet further beings with they even looked taller than that, and they were talking to me about genetic changes for peace in our time. Now, obviously, you could look at that and say, oh, they might be related to the skulls in Egypt and all the rest of it, and possibly they were, because as I kind of uncover other people's history and the things that they've found. You look back and there's whole stories about Anunnaki and gods coming down from spaceships and having tall heads and all that sort of stuff. So if you want to look back and research it all, I mean, there are plenty of clues, but I think it's highly likely that we've been visited for forever, really, by extraterrestrials, and I think they've meddled. They've done, they've come in and started doing things. And when I get to the very end of this, I'm going to tell you about someone else's experience. And you will see that, yes, this genetic stuff has been going on. They did tell me that they were trying to effect some kind of a change to our planetary frequency by using sound. But I've since gone on to discover a lot more about them. So this alien here his name is Teplek, and he is the son, if you want to call it that, of the Andromedan female on the front of the book. And he basically dictated the whole of the second book to me. And I can give you like a fast rundown, but he talks about us going into the future and what we can expect, and any kind of help that we might expect from them, but only in extreme necessity, i.e. An earth change cataclysm of some sort. I mean, they do try and avert things, but they're not here really to be nannies and save us all from our own silly selves. They showed me the future with anti-gravity cars, hover cars, and that's already arriving now. I went to a planet that was a bit more advanced than we are now, and they were showing it, giving me hints and tips as to what we could do to save the planet and so on. He taught me about sensory telepathic communication and how we all are equipped with all that we need to be much more than we think we are. Internal TV, energy points, places in the body where you can go out and go in. I mean, he kind of explained to me what was happening to me when I did it, and I didn't know that was what I was doing, but he said, this is what you're doing. And then he also talked to me, and this was, I don't know, what that book came out probably about 10 years ago. He talked to me about having a clean body and a clear mind, which is the forerunner to everybody getting really healthy and going organic and making sure that, it's like, what you put in here and what you think up there makes what you are. So if you're not healthy or you're suffering from aches and pains, then you've got to look to what's going in your mouth and the way you think. No question, that's it. Full stop, easy. Because you're choosing to create the reality you're in. And some people create that reality without thinking. They don't pay any attention to their behavior and what they do and what they don't do. And then they suddenly think, oh, blimey, you know, I'm fat, or my legs hurt, or I've got a terrible cough, or yada, yada, yada. And you just got to look back to what have you been doing with yourself? You know, how you've been behaving, what are the emotions that are going on inside your head. And it's time basically for us all to more than wake up, you know. So he talks about the ultimate power of the heart, and since I wrote all this down, you know, they now say that, you know, there are more neurotransmitters in the heart than there are in the brain, and there's a bigger energy field in the heart than there is in the brain. And, you know, what do you hear everybody talking about these days when they're saying, do what your heart says you want to do? Listen to your heart. And the best way to make an ideal manifest and have everything that you want is to come from the heart. You know, don't try and figure it out logically, but come from the heart and then let it grow from there. I mean, that's a whole another story about how you can create your own reality, and I'm not particularly on that subject tonight. But it does boil down to, you know, if you're not doing what you love, then you're on the wrong path, you know. And that applies to jobs and life and marriage and diet and, you know, everything. If you want to grow and change your vibrations and basically become 100 times better than you are, then you have to listen to your inner self. You have to really listen to and ask the question, who am I really? Who am I really without all the programming, without all the things I was taught by school, parents, and all the rest of it? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing here on this earth? Begin there. So they actually took me, he took me up into, have any of you ever seen in space, there's a thing called the Large Magellanic Cloud? No, it's a big, like, cloudy place in space with a lot of planets and all sorts of in there. And he took me in there, and I saw these people, who were the strangest people I'd ever seen in my life. They're actually a picture of them on the back of the book. And it was interesting because the first thing I saw was the eye. It's like a bird eye. And then they do this to me so I get a really good view. I see something in detail, and then they pan backwards, and then I got to see this extraordinary looking nose. And the head that looks like he's got some kind of hat on, but it's not, that's his head. And they were talking to me, and this is the Andromedans showing me this. They showed me that kind of black stuff in the background. It's like a representation of a big lake. And it was like, if you could imagine, you know, like in these creepy films where it's kind of like flowing, misty steam, not as heavy, not as condensed as water, but it's lying there like a kind of a energetic soup. Anyway, and this stuff, when you look at it, sparkles. It's black, very dark, but it's got sparkles in it, like energy, like lightning crackling in it. And this stuff, for want of a better word, because I don't know what it's called, is actually a living creature, a living thing. And it has the ability to mimic. Like octopuses and chameleons on Earth, it can change itself into anything it wants to appear as. Okay? And what the Andromedans did was they combined this creature that they had, and they had met these people some thousands of years ago. Now these people, because of the cloud of the Magellanic Cloud, are subject to a lot of different gases and particles from space. They're in a dust cloud, basically. So which is why they've developed these noses that are like kind of elephant's trunks, but they don't come out. They're joined to the face. But they have the ability to kind of seal them down, you know, like that. But they are they're phenomenal mathematicians. And he said to me, they are masters of trinary code. So I said, well, what's trinary code? I said, we've got binary code, which is how our computers work, ones and zeros. But trinary code apparently gives you the thing, the code of the thing, and the energetic, like a hologram. It gives you not just code in a line that means something, but another dimension to the code. Like having, you know, like having a holographic, instead of a flat picture, you have a holographic picture so you can look at it in all directions. And these beings are highly sought after because they can create anything with this black stuff. You know, when I say anything, things like spaceships and highly complex things. And I've been on some spaceships, and I know lots of them are organic based. They have, I know they run on some kind of I don't know, it's a very poor word to say electromagnetic, because that's our stuff and our physics is so out of date. But they do the kind of controlling, there are controlling things in there that is all sentient, it's alive. They took me to one where I could actually see it. It was in the walls, and it was like a living thing. It was like being inside of a living thing that they talk to telepathically, they interface with, and it just went with them. And some of the ETs don't even need that. If the higher dimensional they are, they don't need craft. They think themselves somewhere and they're there. So, so what's happening right now on Earth? Does anybody have a clue as to what's happening right now? Anybody felt something happening, a change? Huge changes, right? Okay. So let's for a start think about what's going on in like the war, the negative end. There's wars and there's crazy people trying to get into politics in America. It all seems like upside down. England's trying to get out of the EU. You know, it's a time of upheaval and change. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. So this is you are here. That's a joke, really. Okay. So this is a fact, because I check a lot of my stuff up on NASA, and I follow the USGS earthquake material. I also follow the solar storm watches and all that sort of stuff. But a fact that our arm of the galaxy, you know, our galaxy is moving through space all the time. And I bet you, how many of you realized that if we call my fist the sun, that the planets don't go around the sun like that. The sun is going forward through space, and the planets are actually revolving in front of the sun. Did you know that? New physics, yeah, it's in front of the sun. But we're all traveling through space at the same time. So it's like an illusion. The illusion is that if we're there looking at the sun, it seems like we're going round the sun, but we're not. Anyway, that's just one thing. Check it out. We are in a part of the galaxy, and if you look back to the 1980s, they were talking about the photon belt. We're going to go through the photon belt. Well, this is kind of it, but it's not actually a belt, and it's something that will take us minimum of 2,000 years to get through, or even longer. I need to check my dates on that. And we are being hit by waves of sound and light photons and new particles of matter, things that haven't been on this Earth before. And the word is out on the block that it's going to change us dramatically. Now, if you just think logically about what has been happening to all the children that have been born, all the highly gifted children, all the autistic children that nobody can do anything with, all the things that are happening across the planet, the globe, the changes. And the changes are no longer just changing like this, they're doing that. Everything is changing really rapidly. And these photons of light are causing things to happen in the body. Now, this is another scientific fact. Particles create new light in the body. If you collapse an underwater bubble, i.e. a bubble of oxygen in your body, in your blood, if you collapse it with a sound wave, and this is my specialist area, you produce a photon of light. And nobody knows why. Nobody knows why. Now, what are you actually doing? You're hitting an air bubble, oxygen, an air bubble with light, oxygen and hydrogen, with sound, and then light is produced. Okay, so that's an interesting fact. Does any of you know about the fact that you can put fire out with sound? Nobody seen that yet? Okay. And you do it, you can use ultra low frequency sound, which is my area of expertise. And you can light, a dustbin lid full of boiling oil, have the flames leaping up like that, turn on a low frequency and point the speaker and the fire goes out immediately. Starting to be used in fire departments in Canada and America. They're using it now, and it's because the sound waves that come from the speaker are interfering with the oxygen patterns. Everything makes a pattern. And when you disarrange the pattern, the oxygen is no longer oxygen. And without oxygen, fire cannot burn. Okay, so that's a very interesting technology, which I'm just trying to say to you that all these things, even though they might sound far-fetched, if you go do your research, you can see that this is true. This is true. So everything, not just in our solar system, but right across the arm of the galaxy. I don't know if you've noticed, we've yapped on about climate change and all that sort of stuff, but did they talk about, the climate change that's happening on Mars and the changes in atmosphere on Jupiter? Everything is being affected. It's not just the stuff we've been doing, it's right the way across our solar system and out into the galaxy, because the whole galaxy is passing through this cloud. And it affects every single thing right through the Earth, every plant, stone, rock, water, everything is affected. And one of the things that it can encourage to happen, which may not necessarily be good for us, is expansion. And when the Earth expands, that's when you get very large earthquakes and tectonic plates moving and that sort of stuff. So we do have to pay attention to that. So unfortunately, the top of that is missing, but this is basically what the ETs told me quite some time ago about what's happening now, and they call it the sunflower analogy. Okay, so imagine you have this sunflower or a flower, and the seed landed right on the top of a cliff, and it barely had any soil and hardly any water. It's blown by the wind the whole time. It's not going to thrive. Okay, it's not going to thrive. So think of us as the sunflower. We're worked to death. We're trapped in a society that makes us use money the whole time for everything. People are starving where other people are throwing away food. We are not thriving. We are destroying our planet with chemicals. You know, we've just suddenly gone mad here. So we need to do something, a reversal of behavior to make the planet thrive. And when you look at the rate, since like after the war, people were healthier during the war and after the war than they are now with the stuff we eat and all the rest of it. You've all heard about that, I'm sure. So imagine this sunflower out there and it's really not thriving. So you change the environment that it's in, i.e. you change what it receives. So you could take it from this environment and maybe build a greenhouse around it. Give it new soil, give it extra nutrients, give it lots of lovely warm sunlight and water. All the things that we are receiving now through space is coming at us, all these photons of light, all kinds of stuff, not just that, but chemistry as well. And it's changing our DNA. It's making us different people. Our vibrations are changing. And one of the things that they said would happen to you when we get fully into the swing of this, and we're actually in the middle of it now, is a change in the quality of the light. Has anybody noticed a change in the quality of the light? Yeah, I mean, all right, so I'm doing the talking here, but I have found in the last couple of years, I never had to wear sunglasses ever. But don't any of you find the light is really bright when the sun comes out? Like brighter than it used to be? I never used to have to wear sunglasses. Anyway, bear with me. And this is all about adapting to the positive, listening to your heart. They told me that, like it or not, even if you do nothing and you drag your heels, you will eventually be swept along by it. And, this lift in your spirit and a persistent lightness in your heart, feeling good every day when everything feels right with the world. It's like imperceptibly finding that everything is somehow going better. And there's going to be so many changes coming up that, we might have to go through a whole lot of like the washing machine syndrome. Because everything, when you have a polarization happening like this, everything separates. So the good gets better and the bad gets worse. So you see the opposites, the opposites of good and bad really highlighted, which is what we're seeing now. What we see now in the news every day. So what also happens when you start to receive frequency into your body that changes you is all the patterns that are in your body, the old stuff that you've been holding down and not looking at, and that kind of stuff comes up. It gets released. It's like when you point the frequency at the fire and the oxygen gets disturbed. It's no longer there. So this is what happens. This is the basis of the work I do. It brings up emotional stuff that's been creating issues in your life for a long time. So you may have held anger at your father, or stuff like that from when you were a child. And it may not be conscious in your mind now, but it's held in your body somewhere. And so all of this comes up, but just let it, try and be aware so that you don't let it take you over. One of the things we need to learn now is about our emotions and not allowing ourselves to become our emotions, i.e., when you get angry, nobody says you can't be angry when you need to be, but don't become the anger. Don't lose yourself in the emotion. Recognize that you feel angry, but don't dump it. Don't, start looking at stuff in a different way. And this is what the ETs told me, and they said that the higher frequency acts like a gentle eraser on the mind. Now, something that I think is very, very common with most people, where has the time gone? You know, who's never got enough time? All the time, never enough time. Where's the time gone? Oh my God, it's the middle of April. Where did this, you know? And then the other thing is memory. Who has been experiencing, you know, whether you're young or old or what you are, there's issues with memory. And the ETs did say to me that the light acts like a gentle eraser to negative memory, which, hallelujah, because then you'll forget when, you know, Aunt Fanny did an awful thing 20 years ago and you still don't like her because of that, because you'll forget it, you know. And I love that. I think, great. Actually, if all the negative stuff suddenly disappears, we'll be different people. And then once you start to think positively, it accelerates, and then what you resonate with, the positive things, start to come back to you. And so your life changes really rapidly, really on a positive trend. But you've got to get rid of all the gubbins, the negative stuff. And this is what this frequency, this energy cloud, this whatever it is that we're in, scientific fact that we're in it, go look it up on NASA, is doing. And so with the good things, they'll follow one another and become a way of life, so that we can change really, really, really rapidly once it begins. And when you look around, if you look on the net, you know, there's people out there doing great things, sharing great things, inventing great things. It's all out there. Do you see that out there? You're not looking in the right places?
This is all new for me, so...
Oh, it's new.
It's not necessarily things that I've been looking for.
Oh yeah, well you've jumped in at the deep end then. And I mean, I'm just skimming the surface here. You know, I can do a really good talk on the nature of reality and how you create your own reality and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, and raising your overall awareness of everything will raise the level at which your physical body and cellular structure vibrates. And this will entrain you to match the level of the next dimensional reality, which is where we're going. And it's not, I go to bed tonight, I wake up tomorrow and everything's different. It's subtle. It's subtle. It's an every action you take change. And if you look at the science and the mathematics, this is sound made visible. Who's seen cymatics? You have. Okay. Where you make a sound show its shape to you by, pattern. And every time you go up an octave, a sound becomes much more complex. When you, if you put sound on that you take a metal plate and you connect it up to sound, you put sound on the metal plate, you play the sound forms, depending on the note, the sound forms a picture, right? You've all seen that. So, when you take that note up an octave, like that, just before every single octave, you have a chaos point, right? The picture will be formed and it will be moving in a clockwise direction. When it hits just before the octave, it goes into chaos. So everything on the picture will be destroyed, it jumps around, the sand jumps about. And then as you hit the next octave, the next dimension, it forms a much more complex picture and it starts to revolve the other way. Okay? Now, if I were to show you like a 3D model of that, and the sound is going this way and then it's going that way, what you're actually describing is a spiral which is doubling every time. The whole world is based, there's so many spiral events in the world, okay? And there are points or nodes in it where chaos happens before change. And this is where we're at on a worldwide level. We're in the chaos coming to the change. It's inevitable. Can't stop it now, thank God. So, and these dimensions, it's not like woo-woo stuff. It's been there. It's the same as when you used to watch Roy Rogers and Stagecoach, and you watch wheels now on films. When they go fast enough, they seem to go backwards and then they disappear, because they are faster than your eyes can perceive. And it's all about what you can see and what you can't see. It's like our ability with the visible spectrum of light. We don't see ultraviolet and infrared, but we know it's there. And there are a ton of other stuff that we don't see. We don't see oxygen, but we know it's there. It follows that same principle, that anything that gets to a certain frequency past what we can see, then we say, well, is it there? I mean, we just got to... quantum physics is doing a lot, but we do have to really grow up with our grasp of what really, where we really live, and how many dimensions there are to where we live. It's like being a goldfish and pretending that the only thing there is water, when above the water is all the sky and the air and so on and so forth. So now I ask the question, do you want more information as what's been happening on and off the Earth since the 1930s? And if I drop a little fact in here, according to one of the latest whistleblowers, Corey Good, the Germans, a breakaway group with the German scientists in the 1930s, they were the first people on Earth to have spaceships from back engineered and technology that they got from extraterrestrials. And they were running in parallel with extraterrestrial group that were working with the United States, you know, the back engineered from Roswell and all that sort of stuff. And one of the funniest things that if you go to the site I recommend and you go see what this guy's talking about, has anybody ever seen the very famous picture of the White House with a triangular fleet of UFOs going over the top of the White House? Yeah, you've seen that? Well, if I said to you those UFOs were actually Germans, what would you think? Well, you would be surprised when the truth comes out. And I say it with absolute 1,000% confidence, because for years I've known Laura Eisenhower, who is the granddaughter of the President Eisenhower. And it turns out that this group that had the UFO technology came to America, to Eisenhower, and said, what we need is your industrial might, because we want to go out into the solar system and mine and do all this kind of stuff. And America said, no, you know, we got our own UFOs, we don't need you. And then that was when they did the flyover, because the one thing that the Americans were really, really afraid of was that the people would find out that UFOs were really real. And then they would have to come clean on what they've been doing. So then Eisenhower signed, and Laura Eisenhower's been talking about how she got taken to Mars and all that kind of stuff for years. And did anybody pay much attention to her? Well, some people did, but the majority of people thought she was a bit off the wall. But it turns out that the probability of it all being true is just tipped over 100% into 1,000. So anyway, have any of you ever seen any pictures on YouTube of people who've photographed the sun and said there was another planet there? And that's not a green, you know, the green light you sometimes get on a camera. And this picture here comes from the Solar Flare Watch official site. And this is the, what they do is they blank out the sun so that you can see all the flares that are coming off the sun. And when they did that, there were 2 big spheres in the background. Pretty big, in fact. So one of the things that I want to bring to you after I've now told you about my ET experiences, because they're kind of running parallel, because the message that the Andromedans have been giving me and gave me 5 years ago for the book I'm now about to publish is the same one that's coming from this group of people I'm going to talk to you about. So if I said to you, in our solar system now, there are hundreds of spheres in our solar system protecting and buffering us from too much of this energy that's coming in. Because, believe you me, I've experienced something with an ET once. And when you experience very high energy, too much, too quick, it can make you really crazy, because it's like, well, let me describe it. Once when I was dealing with an extraterrestrial, I was in conversation with someone, and towards the end of the conversation, this ET had moved into my body. So my energy was still there, but he was kind of melted into me. So I was talking first person to this other person. And when it was over, he said, okay, I'm done now, I'm going. And as he left my body, I got a fleeting glimpse of what his true energy was like as his vibration went up. And it was like ecstasy. It was like I burst out crying, but I started to laugh at the same time. You know, when you laugh and cry at the same time, because it's such an overwhelming feeling. And I realized then, I thought, if people felt like this all the time, they'd go mad. You wouldn't be able to, you can imagine if you were laughing and crying the whole time and feeling that amount of ecstasy, you couldn't cope with anything, could you? And this is one of the reasons why there's a group now called the Sphere Being Alliance, group of 5 different extraterrestrials, very high density ETs, who have put these up in our solar system to buffer us. But there's a whole other story as well, because there are people who run the world, commonly known either as the Illuminati or the Cabal, that own all the money and make everything run the way they want it to run, and the 1% that has all the money, and so on and so forth. They got very, very cocky with it all and thought, well, you know, is that going to stop us? I don't think so. And so they decided to go to their base at Pine Gap in Australia, in the middle of Australia. And a couple of years back, and there's video footage of this, they decided to use one of the highly advanced weapons that they've got, using some form of plasma beam. They decided they would shoot one of these spheres down and destroy it. So there's actual footage of this red beam coming out of Pine Gap, hitting something and illuminating the shape of the sphere. But what the ETs who control these spheres did, as they're non-violent, was they redirected the beam back down to where it came from, blew up parts of Pine Gap. In fact, there's Pine Gap, and you know, it caused quite a bit of damage and killed a few people. But the beings responsible are the blue spherulites, these beings here, the blue avians, who are not here to save us, but they are here to make sure that we go through this change properly and that we do get full disclosure. And full disclosure is what we want the truth from, governments and things like that about what's been going on. That's what the blue avians look like. And if you go to, the list of where you can go to is at the end. But, my understanding and what I've been shown and what I've seen, and I'm a very grounded, ordinary, mother of two, feet on the ground, person from Bristol, is that there's space isn't just space, it's teeming with amazing people. So here, if you want to write this down, this is worth everybody's while to go there. To www.gaia.com. This has got nothing to do with me, but I've been there and it's a really good site. Look for the David at Wilcock interviews with Corey Good called Cosmic Disclosure, and begin at the beginning. If you want to educate yourself and open your mind, then yeah. And Michael Tellinger is another good guy because he is the one who is going to teach us how to live in a world without money. So that's my experience, and I can see that I've got to finish now because something is happening. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that I've stretched your mind a little bit, and hope you've enjoyed it. All right, thank you.